Hi, welcome to GPS 306, how AWS partners use the AWS Well-Architected Tool to reduce risk. My name is Rodney Lester. I'm a Principal Solutions Architect for Amazon Web Services in the Well-Architected program. Later in this presentation, I'll be joined by John Holt, who is the Solutions Architect in charge of the Well-Architected efforts at Accenture. So what are we going to talk about today? So I'm going to talk in general about the AWS Well-Architected Tool, which we call just the WA tool, and give you an overview of what it is and what its functionality is. But we're excited to talk about the Well-Architected Tool APIs, and specifically how partners can use them. I'll talk quite a bit about the current API integrations. We launched with a number of partners, and I'm going to mention a couple of them, as well as Accenture is obviously one of our launch partners, and they're going to give you a live demo with some code samples of how easy it is to integrate. And then I'll give you some pointers on how to integrate with the Well-Architected tool at the end, as well as how to contact us. So let's talk first about the AWS Well-Architected tool. So the AWS Well-Architected tool is a free self-service tool for reviewing your architecture against cloud best practices. It's been around and it launched in 2018, but the AWS Well-Architected framework has actually been around for about 8 years. Originally, it was just an internal set of questions and answers that we used, and we published a public white paper in 2015. We created internal tooling to help us evaluate consistently with customers. But in order to scale it out to all our customers, we published it as a self-service tool. There's 3 primary benefits that you can get from using the Well-Architected tool. The first is just education. It gives you a way of walking through and understanding what the best practices are and gives you links on how to learn more about the best practices. You can then measure your workload against these best practices. And you can integrate this into your governance efforts to make sure that you have certain risks that you do not go to production live with. But one of the most important things that we really want people to do is to improve their workloads. There's often paradigm shifts that you need to think of when you move to the cloud, and you really can improve your workloads. The AWS Well-Architected tool is capable of taking snapshots of where you are in certain points of time, and you can actually keep track of whether or not you're actually making improvements and where you're making those improvements. So what does it consist of? When you go into the tool, the first thing you will do is define a workload. So a workload is nothing but a collection of applications and services that provide some value for your business. The definition and barriers and boundaries of what you call a workload are often very dependent upon what you're doing. They can be very easy to identify. In other words, you have very well segregated boundaries with APIs or something like that that allow you to identify a workload, or it can be difficult at times. You simply need to be able to identify what it is you want to review, and you can call that a workload. So when you perform the review itself, you can choose what you want to review it against. By default, and you can't unselect it, you evaluate your workload against the Well-Architected framework itself. So the Well-Architected framework was written to be cloud best practices. So the questions themselves are rather open-ended, and the best practices are how you would actually do something. But they're written in a manner that is not specific to AWS. If you go through and actually conduct a review and then generate a report to tell you where your risks are, we'll point you to improvement plans that will contain specific information for how to implement it using AWS services, and give you results where you can search our marketplace for finding partner solutions for that. So what's the big deal about the APIs? Well, first of all, if you've been working with Amazon Web Services for a long time, you'll know that we have APIs for every service that we have. So in some ways, it was kind of unusual that we didn't have APIs. But APIs give you a couple of different ways that you can actually extend your use of the Well-Architected tool. Often customers have existing tooling that they track the status of their workloads, they perform reviews against. This will allow you to integrate that tooling with the AWS Well-Architected Tool. One of the nice things is if you're using one of our partners to perform that right now, it's very likely that they're already integrated with AWS Well-Architected APIs. One of the other things that the APIs will support is automation of detection of best practices. So you can, some of our partners have actually implemented detection algorithms, and so they will go through and tell you whether or not you've actually implemented certain best practices. A third benefit of this is actually the capability to pre-populate the reviews themselves with common data that you dispense to your workload developers. So if you have teams that receive environments in which they deploy their workload, they don't have to know the answers to all the questions that are taken care of by the environment that you give them. You can pre-populate all the answers, and then they only have to answer the questions about the things that they are knowledgeable about. And another thing that you can do with this is actually perform reporting. So right now, if you look into the Well-Architected tool, you can see the well-architected reviews that are conducted in the account that you've actually conducted the reviews in. However, that doesn't work for all customers. Many customers have multiple accounts and they're dispersed responsibility. So if you want a way where you can track all this together and pull this information together, the APIs will allow you to be able to pull that information into one reporting interface. So what are the use cases? There are two basic use cases for the API: discovery and insights. So I mentioned discovery earlier. If you have discovery automation, you can basically automatically fill in the answers for certain of the best practices, whether or not you've implemented it. This will allow you to accelerate the adoption of best practices. In other words, you'll be able to quickly identify whether or not you've done things. It provides you the capability of having some governance too, because you can automatically know whether or not you've implemented some of the best practices like encryption at rest. The other use case is really much more for management of your teams and management of just your processes in general. So the insights use case is the ability to actually look across all your reviews and look for multiple things. So one of the things you can look at is, where do you consistently miss best practices that are your priorities? You can also look at the trends of how the workloads change over time. So we provide the capability of taking milestones, which are basically a snapshot that you'd label at a point of time. And you can see whether or not you have drifted forward or backwards on certain best practices. These kinds of things give you the ability to understand where you want to concentrate your internal training or perhaps messaging to ensure that people take certain best practices as serious as you wish them to. So I'd like to demonstrate or talk about a couple of API these use cases in practice themselves with a couple of partners that launched with us. The first example is the discovery example. So this partner is InOps. So InOps joined us on our Twitch broadcast and talked a little bit through their use cases. But if you look here, there are four primary screens that they provide you through. So in the first screen, you can tag the AWS accounts that you want to review. So InOps will auto-discover best practices based upon what you have tagged. The next thing it'll do is in screen 2, it will show you the results of its auto-discovery and then prompt you through the best practices that it did not auto-discover. So it'll walk you through the best practices that you wish to answer. The third screen, you can see what questions were auto-discovered in general across the workloads. The fourth screen when you submit the review in InOps tooling, it will actually upload it to the AWS Well-Architected Tool. One of the nice things about integrating with something like InOps for conducting well-architected reviews is that when we update the framework, which we do often, we've only updated it once since we released the tool, but it is something that that was actually the 8th version that we released. You'll automatically get the latest versions if you integrate with their tooling. The next example is the Insights example, right? So in this case, this is the API integration with Cloud One Conformity from Trend Micro. So in this case, there's a couple of things that you're capable of doing. The first thing is it will actually go through and look at all regions in the accounts that you have configured to use Trend's Cloud One Conformity. And it will let you know whether or not you are actually using the well-architected tool in the regions that you have workloads deployed. The second thing, it will give you a report on what risks are consistently present. So they also have automation tooling that will go out and detect whether or not you've implemented best practices. If you've filled out those well-architected reviews in another fashion, it will give you a list with a prioritized of what the impact is, whether it's a high risk or a medium risk, and where it is in your systems. The third thing that it'll give you is it will actually check your answers. So say, for instance, on the security question about whether you encrypt at rest. A lot of people think of this as only encryption on EBS volumes and S3 objects. But there are actually 30 services that will encrypt at rest. And so this product itself will then walk you through the services that you use that you haven't encrypted at rest. In the fourth screen, one of the things it'll allow you to do is give you very specifically what those are. They also have the capability for you to use their tooling to implement the best practice, and with a simple click of a button. So we have a number of partners that have launched with us. And in this next screen, I'm going to tell you the partners that launched with us as of reInvent 2020. So those are Accenture, who we're going to meet with next, Cloud Checker, Continuity Software, Datadog, InOps, Splunk, Trend Cloud One Conformity, and Turbot. We'll keep a constant list of what partners are integrated on our site at aws.amazon.com/well-architected tool. So the next thing we're going to do is have a live demo. John Holt will introduce himself, and he'll walk you through what Accenture has built and show you the code that he's actually written.
Thank you very much, Rodney. It's John Holt here with the Accenture AWS Business Group. I lead our Well-Architected program. Very excited to talk about the new Well-Architected Framework Tools API. We're very excited about the prospect of what it can bring in terms of automation to the well-architected process. Accenture's been a launch partner back in 2018 with the Well-Architected Partner Program. We've taken Well-Architected and we've made it kind of core to almost everything we do from an architecture quality assurance perspective. It's very, very important to us to make sure that we're delivering quality, well-architected workloads. So we're extremely excited about the prospect of having the ability to discover and gain insight into the wealth of data that the Well-Architected tool has under its covers. And having used it for the last couple of years, we're very excited to be able to use the discovery aspects that Rodney had talked about to facilitate and streamline the well-architected process. And we're very excited about the kind of insight landscape to help make better decisions in terms of how we improve and evolve our architectures over time, where we spend our cycles to make sure that as an IT organization, we're able to kind of evolve with our clients and make sure that we're focusing on the right key areas of focus that need attention. So what we've done here in this well-architected tool, you can kind of see my well-architected console here. We've got a number of test workloads here that we've kind of pumped in here to just give kind of an example of some of the insights. So what we're going to walk you through today is an example of that insight level of application where we've gone ahead and we've got these workloads that have been defined. They have a few milestones each plugged in against them, number of high risk and medium risk issues that represent, a potential portfolio of applications that an individual customer may have. So what we've gone ahead and done is we've built a very, very lightweight single page application that you can see here. This single page application is basically a one-click punch that's going to pull all of that data from the well-architected tool in, and it is a JavaScript single page application with a Go Web Services backend. It's very interesting that we actually built this in Go because that's what our larger application is built off of, but this application in and of itself, there is no SDK support for Go at this point in time, but even without that SDK support, it was still so easy to interact with that well-architected framework API. So I'm going to go ahead and click that button and do the import here. You'll see the data start to trickle in. The first thing that we'll notice here is, we've kind of created a few different reports that we'll walk you through today to show you some of the types of data that you can easily get from this API. So the first we see here is kind of an aggregated portfolio issue summary. So this view that you're seeing here is the holistic aggregated view of the most current issues from the well-architected tool that we just showed you. So you can see, you're able to look across your entire portfolio of reviewed applications and see really where your issues actually are. You can see here, we've got kind of a smattering across all of these, with the key area of focus here being our reliability pillar here. All 5 pillars are represented. We've got reliability obviously being kind of the biggest chunk here. Performance efficiency, another sizable chunk. Security with 8 issues in and of itself, but all of this data again is coming from the aggregated high risk issues and medium risk issues that we just looked at in those workloads from the well-architected tool in and of itself. So it's very great to be able to kind of pull this data together. If you were for example, C-level or perhaps director level resource, you may be very interested in seeing this types of data, because now you can go tell your software development teams, your application development teams, hey, we've got a big problem with our reliability. Even if we're not having issues today, we are exposed to a number of items that could cause issues. The next view that we'll show you here is our well-architected framework issues by workload. So with this, we are actually taking each of those workloads that we've showed you, and we've graphically presented the high-risk issue and medium-risk issues for each workload. So you can see broken down, okay, if I look at each of these workloads, which workloads are actually the problem children? Which workloads are the workloads that don't have the same level of architecture quality? This might be very useful for perhaps an architecture review board or somebody like that who are trying to systematically figure out what to target, what applications need to go up for a potential immediate review so that we can address some of these issues, and where we need to focus our architecture quality efforts to make sure that all of our applications and our application portfolio are healthy at all times. So this is just a really, really quick, easy way to kind of view that data. You can see with each of these workloads, there's a kind of number of issues, but that's kind of the gist of that. So if we take a look at this next workload milestone chart, effectively what we're able to do here is we're able to get into the well-architected framework data. We're able to pull out an individual workload, and we're able to graphically represent the milestones over time. And those milestones, if you're familiar with the well-architected framework tool, are kind of a snapshot of the issues at any given point in time. So what this data is showing here is the high-risk issues over time for an individual workload. So you can clearly see how that workload has evolved over time. Are you improving quality? Are you continuing to move the needle, continuing to evolve? And this is an excellent demonstration that you can bring back as a development team to your architecture review board that says, listen, we're continuing to drive these issues down, continuing to work on what we're doing. We've got, our various modes. You can easily tie this to your development process where you've got your beta release, your production release, your security reviews, your optimization, and so on and so forth, cyclically, constantly improving. So this is a great way to track and show the progress and evolution of your applications. So there's, it's very easy to get this data, as I had mentioned. We'll look at the code in just a second. But this data, again, we have one call from our front end that goes to our back end to get this data populated out and available to the front end. That back end code is only going to make 3 API calls to the actual well-architected framework API. That well-architected framework API, again, we are not using one of the approved SDKs at this point in time, so we have written some Go code that effectively acts as our own SDK. So if we take a look at the first call that we're making, so we're not going to look at the front end code because there's really not a lot happening there. Everything happens in the back end for this application. The first thing we're going to look at is this import account workloads function. That function is going to make one call. Here you'll see the workload summaries, get workloads. That's going to, behind the covers, make a call to the list workloads API from the actual well-architected framework API, which is going to return a list of all of the workloads that my IAM context has access to within the region that I've issued the call, right? And so we're going to pull down everything there. We're going to get all of the workloads. The next thing that we're going to do, once we have that workload data, is we're actually going to go down, and you can see we begin to iterate through that list of workloads, and then we're going to make a call to a function that we call iterate milestone results. That iterate milestone results function is what's going to actually get us all of the data for the actual lenses and reviews and underlying data that helps us kind of build the detailed views of the code of the views that we just went through. So once we get all of those workloads, for each of those workloads, we're going to go out, we're going to do a list milestones call to get all of the milestones that are associated with each of those workloads. And then for each of those workloads, we're actually going, or each of those milestones rather, we're actually going to go out and we're going to do a get lens review call. And that is a get lens review, not a list lens review call in the API. The difference being we want those pillar IDs back so we can construct that very detailed view of the application workloads as we go, as opposed to just looking at aggregate high-risk issues and medium-risk issues, respectively. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. It's a lot of iteration, but again, it's only 3 calls to the API to generate all that data, to generate 3 meaningful views to the entire kind of IT landscape, from your developer that's building applications to your directors and C-suite that are helping decide funding and IT vision and things moving forward. So this is an extremely, extremely powerful API. We're only doing a little bit of, beyond those initial calls, just a little bit of lightweight processing to get things into the proper viewpoint for the API so we can meet our API contract. A couple structs. Again, if you are working with one of the SDKs, you are not going to be requiring this because they'll be handled for you on AWS's behalf when you use that SDK. But because we were writing in Go, we had to create a couple structs to hold all this data that we get back. But it's a very exciting API. We're really excited to be part of it and to be a launch partner with this API. We're fascinated by the possibilities that it opens up in terms of maintaining architecture quality assurance. And we're absolutely fascinated to see what we can do in terms of automation on the discovery side as well, not just the insights piece as well. So we're very excited about this launch and are looking forward to doing more in the future. And so with that, I will hand it back over to Rodney. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks, John. Really appreciate it. We will have Go support in the official SDK as soon as it's live officially, and it should be now at this point. So Go support should be in the actual official Go SDK. So I really wanted to talk about if you want to get started. So if you're a partner and you want to work with us on how to do this, the first place I would recommend is you go look at the actual product documentation itself. The product documentation has the listing of what the APIs are and how they can do it. You can just go start using this yourself and work on how to integrate it with your product. Or if you're a customer and you want to build it into your own internal tooling, it's the same thing. Or you can contact your account team and we can help you. If you want to work with an existing AWS Well-Architected partner, by all means, we also have our own listing underneath the partner site. So if you look at our site, so we have a microsite underneath the Architecture Center. So aws.amazon.com/architecture is the Architecture Center. We have a site for Well-Architected, and there's a site underneath that will list our partners. You can go there, find partners that are actually involved in the Well-Architected program and are members of the Well-Architected competency. We have lots of other resources for you to learn about Well-Architected. The framework itself is fully documented at the architecture site that I pointed out before. So aws.amazon.com/architecture/well-architected. There you can access either PDF, HTML, or Kindle versions of white papers around not only the Well-Architected framework itself, but each one of the pillars and every one of the lenses that we've created. And we're creating more lenses all the time. You should keep an eye out for additional lenses. Lenses are really a specialized way of looking at either a technology segment like HPC or serverless, or perhaps a particular technology area like IoT, analytics, or even an industry vertical like FSI. We also have a lens on machine learning that I would strongly encourage you to read if you're building machine learning applications. One of the other things that I want to point everyone to is the Well-Architected labs. So we have a number of labs that are actually hosted on GitHub, but we've rendered a HTML site to make it easy to use. We've got labs around many of these best practices, and you can learn how to implement these best practices at your own pace by going through these labs. We give you an estimate of how much it will cost to run the lab, and we give you instructions for how to tear everything down that you've done within the lab. So be sure to do that if you want to stay within the cost estimate. We have lots of other information around building great architectures and how you can actually use other things like our solutions and other builders library and everything else that are linked to off of the Architecture Center. And so the Architecture Center is the aws.amazon.com/architecture. And as I mentioned, we have a number of pre-built solutions, and we have solution constructs, which are pieces that you can put together to build your own solutions. They're available at aws.amazon.com/solutions. And with that, I'd really like to thank you for paying attention and joining my session. Please complete the session survey and let us know how we could do things better. And by all means, I wish you the best of luck in building your architectures, and happy architecting.